data is a foreshadowing of traction in tech generally. For those that were here in the late 1990s, it's no accident that Expedia, Travelocity, Priceline, Hotwire were early out and early big. Sabre was a structured data and API set that existed before there were browsers. And all of those could jump right on the back of those rails and really track much faster than other sectors. It's not the biggest market that's out there. Healthcare is much closer to that. For the same reason, data's importance, the HITECH Act, by no accident, encouraged getting structured EHR data into the digital domain and out of paper. And so because of data and API's importance in the health space, we have these 4 aces of API here today, and I want to just run down the line and let them all introduce themselves quickly.
All right, sounds good. Thanks. So I'm Drew Schiller. I'm co-founder and chief technology officer of Valytic. Valytic is healthcare's leading digital health platform for connecting patient-generated health data from digital health apps, wearables, in-home medical devices into the healthcare system. So we connect over 250 apps and devices today. Over half of these are FDA-listed Class 2 devices like glucose meters, blood pressure monitors, spirometers, pulse oximeters, of course, also your wearable devices. And we're deployed to hundreds of customers in 47 countries to over 223 million lives globally. So.
Awesome. My name's Andre Popp. I'm the founder and CEO of Human API. So we've built what we call the world's first consumer-controlled real-time health data network. So we've written thousands of integrations to clinics, labs, devices, apps, payers, pharmacies, and then we have a universal single sign-on product that we deploy to a whole bunch of applications from direct-to-consumer companies all the way into pharma, payer, provider, et cetera.
Yeah, my name's Ted Tanner. I'm the co-founder and chief technology officer of PocketDoc, and we are the operating system for the business of health, and we have APIs from physician search, identity management, cash prices, scheduling, health credit outcome scores, and several other APIs. And we also have a complete marketplace that we actually can white label. And we have everything from 4.6 million providers, 50,000 cash prices, and several identity management entity resolution endpoints.
Awesome. And hey guys, I'm back. Missy Krasner. Saw you earlier today. I'm currently the managing director of healthcare life sciences at Box. And believe it or not, Box actually does have APIs. We currently have an entire API business. So if you ever wanted to do a patient education app, or you needed to actually get rich media out to a patient, or you wanted to do credentialing and appify that process and take it off paper, you could actually do an API call to our content layer. It's totally HIPAA compliant, so we are in the API business as well. But one thing I did want to actually say is I'm sort of the seat filler up here if you haven't figured that out yet. And basically, what my claim to fame, if there was any, was that back in the day when we were trying to figure out how to do a better job of interoperability in healthcare, we came up with this concept of a nationwide health information network, right? Total joke. And essentially we tried to figure out whether or not we could build a private internet for healthcare information. Totally failed, right? So essentially we have all these sort of different step-down kind of ways of dealing with this. This was before APIs really started hitting healthcare, OAuth, all kinds of things that we think about today. So you're seeing some really interesting leaders here who are actually moving us into, this sort of what I would say rapid-fire way to actually share data, as opposed to the heavy, clunky, expensive point-to-point integrations that the acute EHRs are still doing today. So I'm just here to provide history and background, nothing else.
Great setup, Missy. Thank you. We'll do a few questions to get the conversation started. We'll hopefully have time to turn to the audience as we get going here and let the fun ensue. So just to follow along with that, Missy, and to everybody, I'll start with Drew and go down for the first one, but why today? Why now, right? Is there somebody shooting incumbents that don't get out of the dark ages that's driving everybody toward the data path, or is there a big carrot on the other side, or has friction been removed? What is it that makes it now the time for data and API?
Yeah, so we're seeing right now a transformational shift in healthcare. Can you guys hear me? Is my mic working okay? Okay, good, all right. So we're seeing a transformational shift in healthcare that's driven in part by actions from the federal government, so the Affordable Care Act, meaningful use, et cetera. And then we're also seeing a shift in the consumerization of healthcare, so the world's largest consumer electronics companies, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Samsung, entering into this space. And these worlds are converging in a way that has never before been possible. It's creating circumstances that have never before been possible, right? So in terms of the opportunity of the market, right now there is data that is accessible that was never accessible before through the EHRs. There's data that was never accessible before from the patients, and there's engagement that was never before possible because of these consumer electronics companies who live and breathe on engagement, whereas we in healthcare, to Missy's point, have failed in consumer engagement for decades. And so I think that's really the catalyst for what we're seeing.
Yeah, I think that I agree with a lot of that. I think the one thing I would add that we're seeing, so you're seeing the regulatory pressure from the top and all of that. You're seeing the consumer demand from the bottom, right? You're seeing this kind of unbundling, at least at the services level. Like, why can't I have, as a consumer, the type of experience that I want to have in this industry as opposed to some others? And then the one other thing is you are actually starting to see that the technical decision makers within these organizations have a little bit more sway when you compare that to 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago. So that, I think, is also driving a lot of adoption of APIs because it's not completely top down anymore. You're definitely seeing a shift from these sort of mid-level product managers, technical people within these organizations that are able to at least pick and choose and pull tools and then bubble those up within the organizations that they work in. So.
Yeah, I agree with that, Andre and Drew. I also think that right now, if you look at any innovation curve, we're right in the middle of the vertical aspect of a logistic curve, so to speak. And the other aspect that's driving that, at least from PocketDoc's perspective, is we are focusing at least half of the company on the developer. So we're giving the developer the tools, and I believe TechCrunch mentioned it. They said PocketDoc has the API for non-health developers. Now, to me, and I'm going to be a little provocative here, I believe it's almost irresponsible at this point for the health tech sector not to adopt some of these technologies. The expectation being that the first thing any developer does is go out and look for an API for that. Not an app for that, not a consumer for that, but an API for that. So if you look at the development of Lucene, Cassandra, Spark, any of these technologies, and now in fintech, the blockchain, as well as all of the open source that's I believe is going to influx into this market, we're going to see great adoption. And the expectation is if it doesn't work out of the box, it doesn't work.
Yeah, the only thing that I'll add, and I'll also to be provocative, is that I think that the issue is this. It's one thing if you're sort of a mobile health company or you're a startup and you want to get access to a lot of structured data that's out in sort of the kind of what I would call the traditional markets, right? And you want quick and access way to that. But I think what would be helpful to everybody in the audience, and probably even someone stupid like me, is which platform do I go with? Which APIs do I develop with? Am I going to put a lot of time and effort if I'm a young company, or even if I'm a Johnson & Johnson, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to put a couple custom dev team on this. I want to develop this in-house app, and I want to use, Validic or Human API or even PocketDoc for some of the, really cool stuff that you guys do. Is that going to translate if I need to do it 5 times over again with another app with another use case? That's the big question. We're now in a world of APIs, right? And if I know I want to do payments, I go to Stripe. If I know I want to do push SMS, I go to Twilio. Hopefully, if I want to do content management, I come to Box, right? But healthcare is big, so.
So I had one other really quick thing to build on that. The really interesting thing is, we have startups that come and work with us, Human API, and they're like, oh, of course it works this way, right? Because they're so used to the web services world. And then when we go into some of the larger organizations that we sell into, really big pharma, really big provider, really big payer, for them it's almost akin to teleportation, right? Because they'll look at it and they'll be like, okay, I didn't know you could even do anything remotely close to that. And then it is your job, I think, to within these organizations, start with something that works, a workflow, right? Not just this crazy innovative thing that doesn't do anything, but actually to try to power that layer. And then you can build up from there, right? You can start to layer more value on top over time. So,
yeah, so go ahead, Drew.
I was just going to say, so a really interesting follow-on to what you're saying, Missy. So right now in healthcare, through Meaningful Use 3, there's an additional piece of criteria for an API to be able to access health data. So Meaningful Use 1 and 2 is, patients should be able to view, download, and transport their data. Now with Meaningful Use 3, assuming that goes through, they'll have to view, download, transmit, and be able to access their data through an API. So I'm actually on a task force through the federal government that's trying to determine what this actually means. And this is actually a big concern for, I think, all of us in this room and in healthcare in general to make sure that we being the people who are going to be implementing this, are doing this in the right way. Because to your point, right now there's like 15,000 APIs-ish around out there. There's over 50,000 providers. And so all of a sudden, are we going to triple the number of APIs that are out there in existence in order to access this data? I don't think that's reasonable. So what is reasonable, right? And so there are a lot of challenges out there around what exactly does the API application to healthcare mean?
Yeah, and I think there's definitely room, because we are looking at such a large, $3 trillion a year market here. There definitely is room for best of breed. I mean, you have three of them here. I say use these three. I'm biased right now. So the fact is that we do talk a lot about this issue, and the 3MU legislation is going to be very important. But we do not want to have the technology legislated. Let the technology water level reach its own point, because as soon as we even come close to that metric of a regulation, we've already changed the complete landscape. Mm-hmm. And I guarantee it, by the end of this year, it's going to be moving so much faster in that area. But I do think that there's going to be a lot of fallout. There's going to be a great washout this year of some of the technologies. And the people who really know how to build, 6-9 uptime software is going to fall out, because the expectation is going to be there from a developer standpoint as well as a consumer expectation standpoint.
Just to continue to build on that, for the investors in the audience particularly, how can you tell which people are going to fall out? Why have you all emerged while lots of other people have fallen away? Anybody want to jump in for that?
Well, first, we build software that doesn't suck. And it's hard. Well, let's not forget about that. There's a lot of companies out there that are acting like they're building software in this area. And also, we have worked very hard at the what I call the rebar level. Like, PocketDoc rewrote all of the EDI X12 transactions, and we, at the specification level, to bring it into present-day real-time efforts. And we can dynamically adapt our business model to meet our technology, or our technology to meet our business model. And that's important. If they want it as a PMPM, which I hope that changes and goes to more of a query-based step gradient model, but I hope that the best of breed actually emerge as adapting business models in both avenues.
Yeah, I don't think technology is typically the reason why companies fail, right? I think it's more of a product market problem. And so, in fact, I was just emailing with an entrepreneur this morning. It's a very interesting technology for data identity through biometrics. But the problem is when he's asking me for all these introductions, and so I made a one or two, and they're coming back and they're saying, it's kind of cool. I have no idea where this fits on my roadmap. They're not looking for this solution, right? And so he's got a product that's in search of a market. And that happens all the time in healthcare. Like, I solved this problem. Well, it's not a problem unless somebody's going to buy it, right? Or at least it's not a problem worth solving. And so I think by focusing on the market, right, you end up coming up with a solution that's both viable and can actually scale your business.
The way that we think about it is, I think it's sort of clustered around these two extremes, right? You have this sort of, you need the right amount of Silicon Valley hubris, not too much, not too little, right? Because when you have too much, like, I'm going to go and change healthcare, and you see these posts, they pop up on Hacker News, and you read them, and then you try to scratch below the surface a little, and you realize there's very little there. And that's pretty common. And not to dissuade, I think it's good, you have to start somewhere, but I think there's a lot of fluff that with this environment will probably wash out. And I do think actually there is the other extreme, which is there are a lot of people in healthcare who start with, no, there's no way that's possible. Like, there's no way that we'll ever change this.
We've been doing it for 30 years. Yeah. There's no way it's
exactly.
possible.
And so I think striking the right balance between those and sort of trying to hit it right in the middle. At least that's how we build our team. That's how we pick our customers and so forth. So
Andre chiming in with the old adage that a developer who talks a good game probably doesn't have one. For the folks on the stage, is there an example of a company who's picked up data via APIs and really run with it in a way that you'd like to showcase the power of data to create traction.
I'll go. Yeah, Ascension Hospital literally transformed their diagnostic centers in 2 weeks, where they had elastic pricing based on time of day for all of their MRI, CAT scan, and other imaging centers. And they used our API and private label marketplace to do that in 2 weeks. The CFO was very happy with us. So from a return on investment and operations standpoint, and the great thing about the other thing that we're talking about here is the fact it's not a rip and replace, right? You can do it on the side and then fade everything over to get everybody comfortable with the situation. But probably one of the most exciting ones, at least for me as a proof point, is to take like a system like Ascension and immediately have them dynamically change their business model in a couple of weeks.
I'll go the other route. I'll go the startup route. We work with a number of providers, but I think there was one actually, saw him earlier. So I don't know if you guys ever worked with an app called MediSafe. Huge medication adherence.
They're out in the audience.
I know. I saw Omri. I don't know if he's around. We see their numbers because they work with our API, so we know they're off the charts. I think a lot of the, as you sort of see these unbundlings, what we help them do is we help them get data from pharmacy networks across the United States. Our APIs can reach every major pharmacy system in the United States in real time and retrieve that data. That they would not have been able to get that data otherwise. The alternative was self-report. So that's one example, more in the startup landscape of how people are using Human API.
Yeah, that's great. So we work with some folks like Permanente, which is why I felt comfortable making that joke about the ashtrays, as well as we've done some great work with Sutter. But I actually want to highlight some work that we've done in the Upper Northeast with a company called I Get Better, and so they're working with a hospital system in the Upper Northeast for their heart failure readmissions. And what they've done is through our network, they're bringing in connected blood pressure monitors and heart rate monitors. In their initial trial, they had 31 patients, and of those 31 patients, they would typically expect 8 of them to be rehospitalized, and none of them did. And so this represented a $216,000 savings to the hospital just in this one trial. Through the success of that, they're already rolling that out, broad scope, across this health system. And now they're also looking at doing the same for COPD. So whereas heart failure represents $28,000 per readmission, COPD is roughly $15,000 per readmission. So they're really looking to add directly to the bottom line. This is an example of work. This is not future thinking. This is stuff that immediately adds to the bottom line of healthcare systems today.
Actually, I have just like a really basic one that this just goes to show you. So, talking a little bit about Box. So, we do business everywhere. Kaiser Permanente is our customer, Stanford Healthcare, Eli Lilly, Boston Scientific, and that's just, hey, I need to file share in the cloud. Good stuff. But for our API business, it's really interesting. I can disclose some customers, I can't others. But imagine a big pharmaceutical chain, right, who essentially has a vendor that they have to use behind the retail, like where you go when you get your drugs. There's still people carrying paper scripts in, right? This still happens. And legally, you're actually supposed to scan that, and even though you're technically having your pharmacy technician type that data in a structured format, you're still required by state law to scan it and append it to the patient's file. So am I going to build that? Am I going to go to the vendor that I'm already actually paying and have them build it? Or am I going to build it on my end as a custom integration? Or am I going to API out to Box to use it? Same thing with a large EHR vendor. I can say their name. It's Greenway Health. They have a revenue cycle management product out there, right? Today, you can do drop downs and say, okay, here's the billing code for this. This is what I'm doing for this. But oftentimes, you won't get paid if you don't provide extra documentation. And that's in the form of unstructured data. Do you want to build that yourself, or do you want to API call out that? So to your earlier question, I'll just pause. It's not that you build great technology, because sometimes the technology does suck, and there's a market for it. It's not that you actually have product market fit. It's sort of a combination of you have an API that's useful, right, that people are going to pay for, and they don't necessarily want to build it themselves, or you're improving a workflow that is already out there and needs improvement and is going to actually hit a bottom line. But I will say this, there's lots of APIs out there, and not all of them are built really great. And they still make money.
Yep. definitely the recurring theme was the successful API platforms are going to supercharge the dev velocity of all their customers, which I think is a great theme. We just have a couple minutes left, but are there questions from the audience to throw at the data denizens?
Data
What
denizens.
did you call us? That's good.
Wow, here's someone standing up or leaving.
It was that data denizens thing, wasn't it?
Yeah. No questions?
I
Seriously?
am curious about,
Wait,
where-
who's talking? Stand up.
Here.
Oh, there you are. You were the one that was leaving.
I didn't walk out. So I am curious about where the FHIR standard comes into this marketplace, because it sounds like I've got to pick an API out of 10,000 APIs and spend engineering dollars to work with that API. But if everybody had a FHIR interface, would I just build one interface and then be able to work with anybody that came along?
I can talk about that real quick. So
Just, can you re-summarize the question?
So I think you were asking about FHIR APIs. For those that don't know, FHIR, FHIR, is a new emerging standard, quote unquote standard, like the XKCD comic version of standard in healthcare. And I think it's being adopted by some large EHR vendors. So we at Human API support FHIR. I think there's a deeper sort of problem in my mind, which is standards are sort of one way to represent what is potentially a broken model behind the scenes. So I think if you don't do proper modeling on your data, and this is probably like a really deep, long technical conversation, but if you don't properly model your data, you can apply whatever adapter you want and it won't work. And conversely, if you actually do, as we do and model and normalize and actually turn that into the underlying semantic structures that we then expose through APIs, you can layer whatever adapter you want on. You want it as HL7, CCDA, SNOMED, LOINC, whatever. Like that becomes much simpler. So I think FHIR is going to be one of those.
Just a few seconds left. Anybody else on FHIR?
Yeah, I mean, FHIR is basically, it's the new version of HL7. It's great, but if you take FHIR and replace that word with magic, I think that you would have about the right meaning. Like FHIR is not going to solve all of the problems, but I think it's a really great step forward in bringing just baseline health data into a format that engineers are actually willing to work with.
Thanks.
All right, thank you guys
Thanks to
so
everybody.
much. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Paul, Ted, Missy.